This is SaaS Therapy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of SaaS Therapy, the show where we help you save your most important business relationships, your customers. I'm your host, Todd Kirk. I'm joined by my Casey replacement, Deborah Wilson, today. Deborah is way better than Casey, honestly. And Deb, I wish you were here like every week. It'd be way better to have you instead.
Well, I don't know, Casey, if you're listening, apologies in advance. We'll have to see how this shakes out after this episode, but no, happy to be here. Thanks, Todd.
Oh, it's fine. Casey is enjoying a lakeside retreat in Montana, so he's happy not to be here. But we are joined today by Ryan Debenham, who is the CEO of Grin AI, and we are pumped to have Ryan on. Ryan actually is a local. He lives here in Utah near Casey and I, and I didn't know that until we met today. So excited to have him on. Ryan, welcome to SaaS Therapy. Glad to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Todd, and thanks, Deborah. Super excited.
Good deal. So, Ryan, for the benefit of our audience, why don't you tell them just a little bit about your background and kind of how you landed where you are today?
Yeah, happy to. I can go down a few tangents. I often describe myself as an engineer turned CEO, and I do think that brings a bit of a unique approach to being a CEO, and we could talk a bit more about that. One of the topics that I love to actually go deep on is how my personal perspective of go-to-market and building for customers, and building a durable business has evolved now that I'm a CEO. And so it's something I try to teach engineers. It's like, hey, you should broaden your perspective of the business and broaden your perspective of go-to-market because you'll build better products. I was a software engineer. I used to be a professional snowboarder. So I'm in Utah. That's probably not all that big of a surprise that, would be into that hobby, but love skiing, love snowboarding, and yeah, excited to be here and talk with you guys about AI. Have a lot of points of view on it.
Well, I would hope so, given the fact that you've built an AI company. It's one of the things that I find it's interesting. I hear the kind of the same two polar opposites and extremes when it comes to AI. One is like everybody's just talking about it constantly because we know that it's the new frontier. We know it's going to change the way business works. We know that everything's going to change over the next few years. So everybody's talking about it, whether they know what they're talking about or not. And as a result, I think a lot of people feel a little bit maybe burnt out on the topic of AI. Mostly because they kind of live in one of two worlds, right? Where they see it all as like, it's hype. Like I get it's going to be great in the future, but maybe it's not awesome right now. So I'm going to try, I'm going to learn because I don't want to get left behind, but I don't believe that I can really trust it yet. And then there's the other extreme, which is just like fear and doom and gloom, right? Which is either it's going to take all of our jobs and we're going to have nothing to do and Skynet's going to come around and the world's going to end. So you have people living on opposite ends of that spectrum. And I'd be curious from your perspective now, as someone who has a career in technology and building an AI company, where do you think we actually are, and how should people be thinking about AI? Since there's, I think both of those perspectives are maybe a little off. And so, what is the real reality where we are?
They're off, but they're valid. Actually, just earlier, honestly, maybe an hour ago, saw a LinkedIn post talking about the like AI news cycle, the hype, the clickbait, the fact that it's disconnected from value today. It's not what customers need today, and there's merit to that. It's we are absolutely in a time where a lot of what you hear about, what you see, what you experience is hype, for sure. No doubt about it. Because there's just generally a lot of buzz and people tap into that buzz and try to take advantage of the buzz. And, some of that buzz is I would call it purely marketing hype. I would say some of that buzz is a lack of really understanding by product companies of how to build AI software. And we've gone through pretty dramatic evolution internally as we have learned how to build AI software. And I would say we were far from understanding how to do it correctly when we got started. And it's a complete paradigm shift. It's the user experience is different. The expectations of AI need to be very carefully set and established. Like how you the user interface, the methods of building trust, just everything's different. I don't know of any best practices, and I know of a lot of companies getting it wrong. And and so that's not, again, I do think people are taking advantage of the hype. I also think we're just in a learning curve, and we're at the beginning of the learning curve. And it requires a lot of folks like myself and others that want to be on the front side of that to go through the learning, to develop those best practices, to develop an understanding of how software needs to evolve to be useful and to truly take advantage of the technology in a way that solves people's problems. So, I'd say that's one side of it. I think it's pretty simple when it comes down to it. Like in terms of human nature, you've got like the fear-based response. I hear people talking about one-person billion-dollar companies. What does that mean for my job? I hear people talking about white-collar jobs getting automated and going away, and like knowledge workers like not being needed, and software. And it's like I would never say a fear-based mentality is the way that you should operate your life. I mean, you could look at it that way. Is there potential? Sure, there's potential that I walk out in the street and get hit by a car too. But if I live my life being afraid of that, then it's not much of a life to live. So could we be afraid of what AI is going to do in the future? Sure. Should some people be cautious? Absolutely. We should be developing the technology with awareness of the potential risks and all of that. But rather, I view this, one of the analogies I like to use is for software engineers, given that was my profession for nearly 2 decades. If you go back into the like 1950s, 60s timeframe, a lot of software development was being done in assembly language and essentially like writing machine code instructions and moving memory around and you know you had absolute control of what was going to happen and how it was going to happen, and you could build the most efficient possible system. And then you start to get the development of more modern programming languages where there's levels of abstraction that uh, that take care of a lot of that for you. And I wasn't coding during the 50s and 60s, but I would imagine there was a lot of resistance at the time to those more modern programming languages in like, hey, I don't have as much control. I don't have the ability to make this as efficient. And also, potentially threats of I like really was a master of my craft. Now this thing that's potentially 100x or 1000x more efficient, is that threatening to me? Will there not be a need for as many software engineers in the future? What happens when we adopt these more modern programming languages? And fast forward to where we're at now, as the need for software, despite I would say multiple orders of magnitude of efficiency improvements, has the need for software engineers gone down? Absolutely not. It is skyrocketed. And it's skyrocketed because the use cases for software have skyrocketed as the availability and the capabilities evolved. So I would say I believe we're in a similar area, or era where are people really going to all lose their jobs in the future? No. But would a software engineer that only knew how to write assembly language today be in high demand? Not very.
Probably not.
Maybe, yeah, in very special use cases, right?
Yeah, it calls for me. It calls to mind the whole idea of the Stockdale paradox. I don't know if you're familiar, but it's this kind of concept that arose coming out of a really dramatic analogy. So forgive me, but coming out of the kind of Vietnam prisoner of war mentalities that were studied. the optimists versus the realists versus the fatalists, and how they fared as prisoners of war. And they found over time that those who were able to hold both kind of the chaos and the concern and the worry with kind of acceptance of where we are, or I guess kind of faith in eventual success, while also being confronting kind of the facts of the situation, right? I think being able to adapt that mindset applies here as well, where if we kind of discount this as a passing trend or passing phase, that we of course will be left behind. But if we become so consumed by the worry and the fear of displacement, all of that, the whatever percentage of our brain we could be using to learn and master and become proficient in this area, also we forfeit, right? So I'm
Yeah.
curious to know, there's of course different perspectives to look at this through, that of a product team that's looking at building AI capabilities into a product or building new AI products, or that of an individual, knowledge worker who is like, I love this term, AI fatigue, just being inundated by,
Yeah.
AI agents, agentic AI, generative AI, machine learning, deep learning, trying to
Yeah.
understand all of these terms, what impact they're really going to have, and feeling like they're kind of just in the driver's seat trying to figure it out for themselves, right? And I think the same principles can be applied in both scenarios. I'm curious to know, in your experience now, having gone through that kind of journey, what maybe are some good principles for holding kind of the tension between those two extremes, and then tactically taking action to move forward.
Um, so it's a great question, and I think the problem largely arises as there's a disconnect between the expectations often that executives or investors or the market will have, and then the reality of what your everyday employee in the trenches experiences. And when an executive says we're going to become AI native, or we're going to gain efficiency with AI, and then yet and that's where it ends, and then there's this expectation that the employee is somehow going to create that, but you know they're in the trenches dealing with frustrated customers, dealing with an overloaded ticket queue or bugs in production that are taking down systems, and it's just the reality of what is being said versus what's actually happening causes burnout. And I think it incites fear of, like, there's there's a lack of understanding of what I do, because what they're expecting and reality, that's not possible. Um, so I think there's learning needed on all sides. I'll talk often on LinkedIn about how executives need to invest personally in learning more about AI, more about the capabilities of AI, and actually go try to implement it. It's very, you go spend 10 minutes, with a YouTube video on how to build an agent with something like N8N, and go try it and just wrap your head around it. Like, what can it actually do? And AI can be incredibly effective. You made the comment, Deborah, of, is this a passing fad, or is there something here? I have zero doubt in my mind that it's a fad. Like, this is revolutionary technology, there is no question about it. uh, it's just that we're still figuring out how to use it, and we're still figuring out how to apply it in ways that make sense. And I'd say Chat GPT and these different chat agents, they have found a use case that is very interesting. People like to chat, people like to ask questions, they like to recall this sort of information, and that's a great use case, and it's skyrocketed in terms of adoption, right? But how do you take that technology and apply it to, like, business process automation? And how do you take that technology that is, I would say, when you are designing a system as a software engineer, you are working with a lot of, like, well structured it's like do this and then do this, and you carefully code it and you write a unit test for it and you verify it works, and you can be certain that that thing will always happen. And when you're working with LLMs that you are literally a brain with certain capacity, and you change an LLM and suddenly the decision that it makes changes, and you're building software in an entirely new way. And the way that if you think about it, in fact, I'll often talk about bolting AI onto an existing system is much harder than building an AI system from the ground up. And an existing system has been designed with a lot of structure and a lot of inputs and outputs and algorithms and things that make it work the way that it's supposed to. Whereas AI is fundamentally different. And maybe you saw Elon Musk, in the development of the self-driving capability. At one point, they basically threw out millions of lines of code and literally replaced it with a LLM based system. It wasn't a incremental improvement. It was a nope, this is gone and this is new. And that's almost what has to happen in some cases in order to build kind of in this new paradigm. But anyway, I may be going on tangents there. I think it's important that your everyday employee start to learn. I do believe in this idea that AI will be useful to everyone. And if you don't learn it, then there will be people that do. And those people that do will be more prepared for jobs in the future. And so, I think it's important to learn. I think it's, if your executive or the market is saying, you need to become 50% more efficient with AI, I caution that a little bit. Like, are you set up for success? I think that executive needs uh, to go spend some time and guide the organization through that process. Um, After they have a better understanding of how that would actually be possible. And we're seeing a lot of internal efficiencies. In fact, I'll give you another good example, and this one may create some haters or or people that agree with me, but as a software engineer, I've personally seen, I would say one of the areas where AI has created pretty tremendous progress is with AI supported coding tools, and tools like Cursor or Claude Code, or some of these different AI supported coding tools. And there's been an evolution of software engineers adopting that technology, some resisting it, some adopting it, some going full on like this is, now we're vibe coding, we just talk to the computer and it codes and that's the way you do it. Or, hey, I use it in some places, like I use it to generate unit tests, but I don't use it for important code, or it's all over the map. But I think the tooling has evolved to become fairly mature, probably because the tooling is for software engineers and software engineers built it, right? So we are our own customer, like, hey, we could use this technology to build something to make us better. And so it makes sense why it would evolve quickly to support software engineers. Um, but it's what we did internally, and got met even internally with some different perspective. Said we opened up as, hey, we believe that as an organization we can benefit from this technology, and we are going to start giving, we got licenses for the team to use Cursor, and we opened up Slack channels for people to discuss their ideas and their wins and their successes, and we did like some internal like brown bags and trainings, and we did that for about 3 months. And what I found is that some people went all in and they started using it a lot, and some people used it almost none at all, like didn't want anything to do with it, and some people kind of fell in between. And I have strong opinions here because I've been a software engineer, and working with my CTO, we said, hey, we are going to move from this is something that we'd like you to try to this is something we expect you to use. And we did, and we drew a hard boundary, and we said, 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, this is going to be the primary method of building new software, and this is how we're going to do it. And um, we drew a hard boundary, and that hard boundary led to some folks that didn't align with it and left, and other folks that decided, hey, I better jump on the bandwagon, and learned very quickly. And as an organization now, I would say that the team is making quicker progress than I have ever seen a software team make ever. Um, and that's not just to like toot a horn. That's to say the tooling now for software engineers to build to build new products uh, is another order of magnitude in terms of effectiveness. It's like going from assembly to object-oriented programming. It's suddenly you now have this capability that we didn't have before that can take tasks that would take weeks and they get done in a handful of hours. And is that applied everywhere? No. And you'll see a lot of folks online with different opinions saying AI sucks at this, or wow, it's amazing. You should use it for this. And software engineers are going through their own learning curve, but my general observation is it is the next frontier for building software. No question in my mind. It's getting better. Even GPT-5 is more effective at coding, and it will continue to get better as the LLMs get better. And it's good enough though today that you can use it and become much more effective. And so we're just in this really, in fact, I made the comment, I'm like, it's been a crazy wild evolution of learning over the last handful of months. And my CTO, that's an understatement. And we're just at the early phase of this major transformation in technology and work, and it's exciting to be at the front of it. But it's also, I think we need the like innovators. We need the people that see the opportunity. They're going to go out and try, because if we don't, we'd never get to where we want to go. Some people have to go try, and they have to fail, and they have to try again. And we're going to develop best practices. We're going to develop, people are going to see products that work. They're then going to copy and emulate. And we're going to end up in a handful of years where you'd never describe yourself as an AI company, because it would be crazy not to be. Nobody today describes themselves as an internet company. Nobody but that was different in the late 90s, right? And in the late 90s, you also had a lot of hype and a lot of buzz about the web, and a lot of companies built themselves on that hype and then failed to actually sustain it. And then you also had companies build during that hype phase, like Amazon and Google, and became the most important companies of the current couple of decades. And I think you'll see that you'll have companies that build with the hype and they'll fail, and you'll have companies that become the most important companies of the next few decades that are building right now. And we're just right at the beginning of that curve, so it's still a lot of open questions.
Yeah. So Ryan, I think there's, for at least for me, one of the things that I see, and I'm curious how you wrestle with this as a CEO, because I think there's two ways to look at AI. One is like, how do we incorporate this into our business as our product and as a part of our process? And then there's the other half of it, which is the employee, which is how do I get the employee to understand and trust and believe that they can use it? So we've got two of these different things. And sometimes what the employee wants and what the employee is trying to do may be opposed to what we are trying to do as a business and as a company.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe the employee has it right and we have it wrong as business
Mm-hmm.
because we're focusing on it the wrong way. And I think this is the wrong question as an example, but I'd be curious to get your reaction to it. But I hear this all the time: like, should we treat AI as a feature in our product, or should we treat it as the product? And that's
Yeah.
one of the things that I think a lot of businesses are wrestling with when they try to think through, what am I doing? How am I working with it? And so that's why it's like, for the employee, is like, am I looking at it as an assistant or as a colleague?
Mm.
And that's like so there's these mindsets that have to change. And I'm just curious your reaction there. Like, where do you start? Where do you think it's important? Do we need to think first about our AI strategy as a company, or do we need to think first about enablement of our end users, or do we need to do it all at the same time? Like, what do you think?
Yeah. It's a great question. Let me make sure I don't that I get to it with a solid answer, because I think you go a lot of different directions. But um, I do think it's different of, should we become an AI powered company, or versus should we build an AI product? I think those are different, and they don't need to be made at the same time. I think that you can, improve the effectiveness of an organization with AI separately from deciding that the company is going to build AI powered or like focused products. Um, the so in my point of view, um, I really do believe 5 years from now, and that might be generous. It might be faster, but 5 years feels right because despite the technology being capable of moving faster, I don't think people will move faster. And so I think that it takes time for organizations to shift and evolve and adapt and change. So call it 5 years from now, maybe 10. Um, I made the comment of you won't describe yourself as an AI company anymore. And that's because if you're not, I think you will no longer be relevant. And it would be like being a company in 2010 that had no web presence, and yet your primary audience is online or something like that. So the the hard part about it is there's a huge risk, and Grin fell. I recently fell on one side of this in terms of making a decision, and others have fallen on the other. It is a big risk to shift your product strategy all up. And I don't think, I think it is very hard to incrementally build for that future. I think that's very hard. Um, Layering AI on top of a bunch of legacy systems, I believe will end up with a uh, much less effective result. And so I think that companies are going to have to largely start to rebuild. Um, and so should a company go all in? Well, that it's a huge risk, but it's also a risk if they don't. The risk if they do is that they take the focus off of the product that has product market fit that's working. Um, you found product market fit, you have a good business model, you've got go to market worked out, you understand your customers, and you understand how to sell and how to market and all of it. It's like if you change that all up, you're introducing a big risk.
Mhm.
Um, and and so, I think there's some examples of companies that have done it pretty well. You look at like Intercom, and they have their legacy system, but then they also have Fin AI, and Fin AI like has its own website and is largely like a different go to market. And I think that they've kind of built it to the side, and my assumption of where they're headed is at some point Fin AI is like the only. It's like it becomes the primary. In fact, I think it already is largely considered the primary for Intercom. And you know, I think that can be an effective strategy. I think where you start to say, hey, here's this new AI feature, and that sits within a legacy platform. Um, I think it's likely that you'll have innovative startups or folks in the competitive landscape that do it different and better. Um, and that's the risk, is that you get displaced. You have companies that come in that take a different approach, that do it with you know new developer tooling that where you can move 10 to 100 times as fast and build something that, because it was built from the ground up as an AI powered solution, it works much better than what you've built as like AI features scattered through more of like a legacy solution. So it's a risk not to do it, and it's a risk to do it. And the calculus is different for every situation. I fell on the side of we're going to build an AI product starting over. And so we have a legacy platform at Grin that is largely what we've gone to market with over the last 7 years, and then we are building a brand new AI powered product. And we did
Rather than
start
trying to
by
build AI into
yeah
your legacy.
yeah
Great.
and we actually started there. We started building AI into the product, and we realized we're going to go this is it's going to take us too long. We're going to make too many compromises in terms of what we actually want to build by doing it this way. And so we're not going to. We're going to build a brand new product. And that new product I've seen evolve much faster than I would have ever even expected. And it's because we're not constrained by legacy design patterns and legacy technologies and, brittle systems. And it's like now we're building with AI a new product, a new paradigm, and we're moving very, very fast. And so I am a fan of that approach, but I'm also more of the person that would roll the dice. Like that's just a bit more of my nature, is like, hey, this is the opportunity, let's go for it. And by going for it, we should be all in. um,
Yeah. So I know we're getting short on time here, Ryan. I wanna ask you one other question I think's worth noting. So we've talked a lot of today about kind of the company strategy on how to think about AI as a company. We've talked a lot about engineers and product development. And software engineers, I think some of them are probably really hesitant to pick up AI. Others are like super full bore, jump right in. But what about just the average Joe Schmo who's not super tech savvy, who's just an average knowledge worker? Let's say I'm a CSM or a salesperson or a front office staff somewhere. Like those folks, I think are feel a little bit more nervous, mostly because they don't understand it. And so, what would your
mhm.
advice be to someone who doesn't come from a technical background, who wants to wrap their head around this and not feel overwhelmed or afraid?
Yeah. Honestly, that is where I see the most AI fatigue, and probably you as well. And I'll see, um, I'll be honest. Like I've had employees that are no longer at Grin that will express frustrations around, like, if I see another CEO talk about AI, I'm going to like turn off my LinkedIn. Like that's that's a real sentiment, and I get it, because when you're in the trenches and you're being impacted by something where you feel like there's just a huge disconnect, that can be a very frustrating experience. And do we expect every CSM, every account executive, to go and become technical suddenly, where they can build their own agents? um, I No, I don't expect that. First of all, I don't expect that will happen. um, I think that if you are a CSM or an account executive that is interested and motivated to learn, like, you will only benefit yourself and your career by taking the time to learn. So I would highly encourage it. And just get started simple. Like I said, go watch a video on how to build your first agent, and go take a course on, and just familiarize with it. That is worth doing. Learning only improves your ability in the future to like expands your opportunities. But that said, we're not yet at a point where I see a tremendous amount of internal efficiency. Like it's not like you just turn it on and suddenly you're 50% more
Hmm.
efficient. It's just
Right.
not real. And you can't just go build an agent that does 50% of someone's job. Like I I went and spent, a couple of weekends trying to automate the like triaging of my personal email, just as an example. And I got it pretty good, but pretty good was not good enough. I don't use it. And it's like, there's a lot of rules. Like an executive assistant that knows how to do that, that's not a simple job to automate. It's just not. Like, which emails do I want to read? Do I not want to read? Do I want to respond to? Do I need to action? Like, there is a lot that goes into making a decision like that. And, you, in fact, you can go find, like, I automated my inbox with an agent in 15 minutes. Like, yeah, BS. Like, BS in a real world scenario where it's not super predictable what you're going to see. And so that's, if I were a CSM or an account executive, or a job where I was being told, hey, you should be able to do twice as much with AI, I'd feel frustrated by that. And this is where I think there's a big need for executives and leaders to personally go invest, and like make sure they're not setting expectations and demands that are unrealistic, um, that are going to burn everybody out because they're not setting the team up for success. If I say you should be able to do your job with a quarter of the people, and so I'm going to lay off 75% of them and expect you to do just as much. Well, then, rather than thinking that that employee is going to become 400% more efficient, you should probably anticipate that that employee is going to burn out pretty soon, because that's unlikely to happen. And so, anyways, it's learning on all sides. I do think everyone can figure out how to improve their daily workflow. I think that there is a big need for companies like Grin and companies in every major category of software that is used by a business to build software that enables this automation that we're describing. We are building a system that automates influencer marketing and like automates it at the outcome level, because influencer marketing is a heavy operational process. And it's, you think about, hey, it's super effective. That's why people want to do it. But it's also, hey, instead of like managing a paid ad, in Meta or Google, now I'm managing 300 independent contractors that are running their own businesses that like are not internal employees, that don't understand the brand the way that we do, and trying to accomplish a certain result. Like that's really hard to do. And in my learning in this role, that's why influencer marketing I would call it still like in the early adoption curve. A lot of brands try it, a lot of brands fail. So pretty much everyone has kind of an influencer strategy, but how many brands are truly like driving tremendous value for the organization through influencer? Not as many as should be, because they're trying and they're failing, they're under investing, they're doing it incorrectly. And so this is where AI can be a massive unlock. AI can do this work. It can do the operational work. It can manage 10,000 employees effectively. But it has to be built very carefully, and it has to be built very intentionally. And we're in the process of doing that. I would never expect an influencer marketing team to go figure out how to automate their own job. We're trying to automate this job to help an influencer marketing team. And even the large teams. I have a big brand that I've worked with. It's a big global brand, and I asked their brand director, said, "Hey, what do you think about the AI that we're building? You're a big team, so you may not need it as much." Was my comment, and she kind of looked at me with her eyes raised and was like, "Are you serious? Like, we're stretched thin too. We might be a big brand. I might have 8, 10 people on my team, but every one of them are stretched thin because what we're doing is very large. We're not running a small program. We're running a global program. We're managing thousands of influencers. We're running, a significant amount of complicated campaigns." And she's like, if AI could do a large part of this work, I would love that. And so, I think there is a need for businesses, typical SaaS providers, to build agentic software, to build the solutions that automate the work that we think can be automated, without expecting everyone to go and do it themselves. Not every CSM should build their own automated customer support or customer success solution. Not every engineer is building their own automated coding agent. Not every influencer marketer should be building their own automated influencer marketing solution. We need businesses to build these products, and we will. It'll happen over the next handful of years. So, one, an employee should not resist the technology. I think they should be open-minded to it. If your company talks about bringing in a solution that's AI enabled, if you resist it, you're likely to fall on the side of, hey, this person's not aligned with where we're going, type of decision and thought process. So one, don't resist it. Be open-minded to it. Learn it. Two, I would recommend everybody have a basic understanding of how these things work. Go build an agent just so that you know how it works and familiarize. Do you need to become super proficient? I don't think so. But when the tooling becomes available, I think a software engineer needs to be very good at AI code editors like Claude Code and Cursor. I think that is mandatory. I think when similar tooling matures in other categories, people will need to become effective at it, because it will become the expectation. And if they don't use it, then they'll get replaced by someone who does. But it'll be a handful of years before these products mature and these things become standardized. And we're all kind of on that curve right now.
Yeah. Ryan, this has been really fascinating. I think since as we're about to wrap up here, the final thing we always give people is homework that we ask people to think about. Right, as a SaaS therapy session, we talked about fears and fatigue and anxiety and potential awesome bright futures. Maybe the homework assignment I would give to people based off of your thoughts today is basically just when you think of AI. And the developments that are coming forward, there's a chance now as we look to the future to think of SaaS companies as an agent is basically a cheap way to get way more help on your team. And so the
Mhm.
idea of extending and helping your humans be more productive is a way brighter future than AI doing our job for us. Instead, it's like,
Yeah,
man, wouldn't it be great if I had a team of 10 because now I have agents rather than a team of one? So
yeah.
there's a bright future ahead. Ryan, thanks for joining us today. I think it's probably good to wrap up here. If people want to get a hold of you, where should they look? LinkedIn, or what's the best way to find out more about you, Ryan?
LinkedIn or starting to post a little bit more on X as well. But LinkedIn and X are, I fairly often share a variety of points of view. My points of view on AI in general, my points of view on leadership, on being an engineer turned CEO, and then a lot about our product and our company. So, pretty active. That's a great place to do it. And then, honestly, hit me up if I've had people reach out and say, hey, this was an interesting post and it got me wondering about these things, and they'll direct message me, and I very often respond. If I don't feel like it's a sales pitch, I almost always respond.
Mhm.
So, if people have questions or want to engage, I'm excited to do it.
Love it. Awesome. Thanks again, Ryan. And thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. SaaS Therapy is brought to you by Brainstorm, the SaaS platform for SaaS adoption. Learn more at brainstorminc.com.